So, I just got done rewriting my atrocity review on PSAs, for like the third time. If you're wondering, most of my reviews don't get rewritten that much, except for like minor segments. The only exception would be the, political ones, or the ones that are based more on real-world topics. Yeah, if you're expecting my PSAs video to be like JonTron's or the Nostalgia Critics episode on drug PSAs, it's not going to be like that, mostly. It's going to be a lot closer to my episodes on extra credits, for instance. And I suppose that's gonna make a good topic of the week this week. Why the hell do I keep making episodes like this? I mean, what does it really get me? I'd probably be a hell of a lot more popular if I kept my mouth shut when talking about some of these topics, like my stance against lockdowns, for instance. And, well, things like technocracy are actually expensive to make. And monetizing something about that is difficult, as it talks about censorship, corporate abuses, and the hypocrisy of these platforms. And they really don't like paying me for that. When it came to the second parts of episodes like Homer Badman Screams to Silence and The Good Family, I didn't even try to monetize those videos. So, I ain't doing it for money or my career. I mean, every so often I get a pretty good review by going political or talking about real-world subjects. My extra credits videos were my favorite of 2019. And I do really like this PSA's video, even though I absolutely know that it's going to ruffle feathers. But I mean, it's not like I'm forced to do this, I don't have a contract. I never had to do a review on Let's Not Be Skeletons. Besides Patreon requests, which yes, I am still working on, slowly but surely, it is completely within my power to choose what I want to review. External factors don't tell me to do this. Usually the opposite, external factors tell me not to do this. Being on YouTube and talking about politics, unless you're like a corporate news channel or a talk show host, is not pragmatic. It's a lot of effort, funds, and time on something that's not a return on investment. And at this point, you know me. It'd be one thing if my opinions were mainstream, but my opinions usually aren't the mainstream. I mean, I'm not like Alex Jones crazy, but I don't often have the default everyday opinion that you might expect. And it's gonna be the same way in the PSA's episode as I tackle global warming, gun control, masks, and more. Here's the thing. If my opinion was the same as everyone else's, I wouldn't feel the need to make these videos at all. Here's a funny thing. Like, a lot of people think that I'm doing this more than ever, and it's becoming hard to watch because I'm doing this so much. But if you follow this channel from the beginning, I've been doing something like this since the beginning. Like, even as far back as my MLP reviews. Specifically the episode One Bad Apple, where the moral was just to tell the most oblivious adult of all times that you're being bullied, and the problem will go away. Which was a solution that didn't work in my actual everyday life experience. I did tell the adults, repeatedly, but they only stepped in to deal with my bully, this is after years by the way, when my bully pepper sprayed me. In my atrocity reviews, I've been doing something like this since episode 14, Seahorse Seashell Party, which went into abusive and dysfunctional families. In Admirables, it was episode 2, with The Mask, which is meant to be a comparison piece. And throughout season 2 of Admirables, I did this quite a lot. I touched on real-world topics quite frequently. Test of the Tested, Homer Badman, Stark Raving Dad, and most infamously, Shane Koizan's Troll. This ruffling feathers isn't new to my opinions on lockdowns or masks. If you'll remember with the troll video, I said that trolling was basically cyberbullying. This was in 2014, when swatting was just under the mainstream. It was just getting attention. And years before 2017, in which someone gave a swatter a fake address, leading to an innocent man's death. And on trial, the culprit really didn't seem to have any remorse of this kind of thing, and was completely willing to do this again. This was also years before those prank channels popped up, where they obviously abused people, but it was just for a prank, bro. This is because every single cyberbully thinks that they are a troll. No exceptions. All of those abusive assholes just thought that they were puckish pranksters. Building up the troll defense allowed them to defend and even justify their shitty and reprehensible behavior, because the internet has completely blurred the line. I made this video in 2014, a year before Steven Universe trolls got a fan artist to attempt suicide, and it wasn't until 2018 until I revealed the harassment that I specifically went through. Each and every person I mentioned in that video thought that they were entirely above board. And of course, by defending harassers and trolls, that allowed media establishments to attack social media as a whole, claiming that they're toxic hellholes. This eventually got places like YouTube, building up their demonetization platforms, attacking people who were clearly not harassers but were just simply edgy. The commentary community, who tried to rip me a new asshole for this stance, eventually got the brunt of their ignorance, and now they are specifically harshly targeted by YouTube's bylines. It's almost like I knew that this was going to happen, because I did. Virtually all of it. You didn't have to be a psychic to know that if you prank called the police to say that an innocent man was committing an act of terrorism, that someone at some point would end up dead. I seem to be cursed with the ability to see the fourth dimension. As in, I can see what we're doing, and I can understand that it's going to have effects in the future, which is something that I thought all people possessed, but it's actually a very rare ability, as I've learned in the past year. In 2016, I reviewed Homer Badman, and in part 2 of the video, I went into details of false accusations and how they could destroy lives. This wasn't really a mainstream issue at the time. It was an issue, but most of the examples that I used came from college campuses, because that's where a lot of this stuff sparked up. It definitely happened to your average person, but this was like years before Twitter's cancel culture really took hold. In a way, I can say that I was against cancel culture before it was a thing, even though people have been canceling others since like stoning was a thing. In the years since, we've had high-profile cases against people like Pro Jared and James Charles that proved to be full of bullshit. These people were viciously attacked for being on the wrong end of an accusation, the former losing 100,000 subscribers in a single day, and the latter losing 1 million in that same day. And there are many, many other people who've gotten falsely accused for X, Y, and Z. There was a recent controversy where trolls tried to claim that the Minecraft YouTuber Dream had used the N-word, which was also patently bullshit. There was also the Pyrocynical controversy, who was accused specifically by someone I specifically said would get himself into trouble by falsely accusing others. I actually said this, and that is what actually happened. Could I tell what was going to happen? Yes, it's not that I'm psychic, it's that I have an understanding that if you give someone a gun that they can use with impunity, that will work very well to destroy the target of their hate on a place like the fucking internet, they are going to use it without hesitation. It doesn't take time or talent to think things through. But no, everyone seems to just want the simple, straightforward answer when life is very rarely like that. I didn't monetize part 2 of the Homer Badman video because it went into some very touchy topics. Like, the actual episode was about accused sexual harassment and sexual assault, and part 2 went deeper into that. This video you're watching isn't monetized either. Like, if you're wondering how I avoid that annoying yellow symbol, I don't even try to monetize videos like this. Which is how I knew that Jello Apocalypse was lying when he said that his vote video was demonetized, even though he never tried to monetize it. Videos don't get demonetized if you don't try to monetize them. Period. At the time I reviewed Homer Badman, I was going against the established wisdom of the crowd. People were desperate to remove any sort of rights of the accused in cases of sexual assault, even though, as showcased, many of these high-profile accusations turned out to be bunk, and the people accused were often innocent. You know why I didn't jump on that bandwagon? It's called principles. I have them, and I stand by them no matter what. Or at least I try to. I'm human. And like all humans, I do make mistakes, but I make great pains not to. And just thinking ahead can do wonders for figuring out where I stand on certain issues. 2016, just before the 2016 election, I reviewed The Good Family and went into the topic of political prejudice. It was something that was really just starting to boil up at the time in the United States. This was a year before a radical left-wing activist shot and injured several Republican congresspeople at a baseball game. This was before many, many stories of people being assaulted and shot just because they wore red hats. And this was 4 years before several people stormed the US Capitol building because they were afraid of a Democrat president. As I'm recording this is before that particular president's war on domestic terrorism will turn innocent Americans into criminals, destroy innocent lives, taboo good or even important beliefs, and divide Americans even further. I am cursed with the gift of foresight. Why any of this isn't painfully obvious to other people, I don't know. I was alive for the entire war on terrorism. I've heard this song before. It never ends. It spins out of control. It ruins lives and tears people apart. I know what McCarthyism is, and I don't need to be a scholar of history to see where a left-wing version of it leads. It doesn't always prevent me from being wrong. I thought that people wouldn't tolerate a second lockdown, but they did. It's really worrying to me that being optimistic is frequently the only place where I am wrong. I never thought people in the land of the free and the home of the brave would tolerate having their rights stripped away because they were scared. I could tell you exactly what's going to happen in the future, but you don't want to hear it. Just like people didn't want to hear that going to college is not the right path for everyone. That it doesn't automatically guarantee them a job. And now we have graduates working at Starbucks, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, wondering where their lives went wrong. I told people that way back when. It's like one of the first of these battles that I picked. And every time I told someone this, they just stared at me. Possibilities other than college was like the possibility of a fish riding a bicycle to them. And I got the same reaction when I suggested that the lockdowns might be harmful. And I'm going to get that reaction the next time I go against the mainstream established trend. You want future? I'll give you future. The fallout of these lockdowns is going to affect geopolitics for the rest of the 21st century. Wars will happen because of our selfish decision to lock down, mostly in the third world as food and resources become scarce there. They relied on a lot of shipments from us that they're just not going to get. But the economic devastation will ravage the developed world as well. Basic cause and effect says economic devastation usually leads to the rise of leaders like Hitler, Stalin, and Mao. So you can expect some of those. My bet is currently on Hungary because of what they did at the start of the pandemic. While countries like the UK, Canada, and Australia have already gotten a pretty good authoritarian establishment underway. This is outside of places like China that already basically have this. The futile lockdowns have destroyed the credibility of the CDC, the WHO, and pretty much all health authorities across the Western world. So when, not if, but when a 1918 level pandemic comes along, we've used all of our will and ammo to fight this one, which will look paltry in hindsight. We will have nothing. People will be hesitant to do anything to fight a virus or a disease because they've already been so scarred by the first time they've been through this. Health authorities frequently lied. There's no reason why they wouldn't this time because last time they frequently used this to gain more power and control people. Any doctor or politician or a medical authority that takes front and center stage will only be accused of trying to further their own career and make themselves a celebrity. And fighting COVID, they've lost so much that didn't end up being worth it. Jobs, savings, families due to suicide or overdose. People just won't give a shit, even if they are stepping over corpses in the street. Many of them would see dying of a grotesque disease a salvation from the life that this lockdown put them into. It's the long, long march of history. We see a problem and we overreact to it. Then we end up ignoring the next problem of a similar stripe. This happens every single time. And keep in mind, this is if those vaccines don't have side effects that made themselves apparent in the oncoming years. If they do end up having some side effects that prove detrimental, things will be far, far worse. And keep in mind, that is an if. Look up thalidomide if you want to know why we need extensive testing on medical advancements and why we don't use experimental medication. But the medical and science community have advanced far beyond that era. They have protocols and stuff. Yes, which we decided to throw out to get this one out as quickly as possible. I'd stop praising Fauci, like, immediately. Whether you like him or hate him, no matter what you think of him, I would stop praising him like yesterday. When the house of cards comes tumbling down, the people in power are going to need to throw someone under the bus. That's just how politics works. When Cuomo was no longer useful, he became the winner of an Emmy, the person who stands up to Donald Trump, the person who gets things done, and a potential presidential candidate until the poster boy for a fucked up COVID response, an actual murderer and a sexual assaulter, despite several other governors making his exact same mistakes. It's now politically advantageous and important to attack Cuomo as much as possible so that the other governors who did his exact mistakes can get away scot-free. At least that's what they hope. Fauci wasn't the sole cause of our lockdowns. Like George W. wasn't the sole cause of the war on terror. But Fauci will get the blame, and his name will be written in infamy. In the future, every single medical doctor will try their best to avoid being a Fauci, because being a Fauci is probably one of the fastest ways you're going to lose your tenure and your respect. Especially because he is very apparent and determined to keep his time in the limelight as long as possible. The man's over 80 years old. This is his last rodeo. When the COVID pandemic ends, that's it. His life is basically done. He has nothing left to look forward to. But in the COVID response, he has made himself so famous and been at the forefront of all of this, he will be sacrificed for others' political careers when things finally crash down. Praising Fauci will be as unpopular as praising invading Iraq in just a few years. Maybe I'm wrong. It's a possibility. It really is. It's a nice possibility, and it's the possibility I wish for. Do you really think that I want any of these negative side effects? Let's say if any of this stuff happens, though, you do not have the option to say that you didn't know that this could have happened. Health authorities can't say, there's just so much we didn't know, because I went into all of the details and the consequences of their actions last year. We knew that Cuomo's decision was killing people before he was awarded an Emmy, and before media establishments decided that he could have been president. I warned you all about cancel culture, about defending troll culture, political prejudice. I'm one of the few people my age who doesn't have to worry about college debt. My job might not be all that glamorous. I still yell at SpongeBob for a living, but it is a living, in a world where doctors are going bankrupt because of their education costs. On one level, I'm not doing this for other people's benefit. I do this because I feel that it's what I have to do. Call it a principle, call it a moral, call it a complex if you wanted to. I do this because I need to sate my conscience. In many of these situations, my two options are speak up or do nothing. And from experience, doing nothing destroys a man more than anything else. I don't know if technocracy is going to do anything in the long run, change hearts and minds. Probably not. I'm well aware that it's probably not going to affect anything the long run. But the other option is just sitting here waiting for Google to quash me and the people I care about on their quest for global domination, while Susan Wojcicki eats the blinding fruits of her nepotism. Staying silent, for most people, is the easy path. And for the first 21 years of my life, I stayed silent. I was taught to. Speaking up about my bully got me nothing. Saying I didn't want to go to college got me yelled at. Even today, you don't talk about real-world issues and stuff that actually matters, and you can get paid quite well online. Autism topped with social anxiety made it harder and harder to say anything, until I got pissed at myself for not finding the words during the heat of the moment. Eventually it became very hard for me not to speak up. I can even consider myself unable to not speak up, as I am very ashamed at my silent past. But I will say, it's not always an easy principle to stick with, and it's something that requires a lot of sacrifice. But sometimes you just see something that reaffirms your beliefs. Remember when I said that I rewrote the PSA thing 3 times? Well, the main issue was the Arthur PSA on masks. My stance hasn't changed, if you're wondering. This whole time. The first time that I wrote that segment, I went in pretty hard. I tried to do what I did in the documentary video. However, then I made the plague of moral convenience, and it felt like I said what I wanted to. So that segment of the video didn't need to be so harsh. So basically, for the first time ever, in my entire history on this platform, I neutered my words. I took any talk of masks out of the mask PSA and talked basically about the production side of it, which is still terrible, but that kind of undermines what I was doing. And it said something about myself that I don't want to be true. That I can be shamed into silence. That is not an aspect that I want to be a part of who I am, ever. Especially because, a part of this is definitely for me, but a part of this isn't for me. When I do this, it's not about what I want to say. It's about what I think that others need to hear. Not want to hear. What others need to hear. It's a kind of attitude that I do go into with my actual reviews. It's that thought process that I went into with my Soul review, when I thought that other people were having a bit of a hard time understanding the complexities of the film. But I obviously do that a lot more when I talk about real-world subjects. I'm always doing research on topics. Every single day, I add, a new source or whatever on a topic that I'm interested in. Like the lockdowns and their effects. To this day, I'm still collecting more sources. I've got my ear to the ground in many, many places. And every so often I get some news that breaks my brain and just sends me over the edge, like when Cuomo was awarded an Emmy. So, since early last year, Canada has been making face masks mandatory, to the point where children are required to wear them in schools. Now, 5 days ago, Canadian health authorities, after requiring masks for almost a year, have decided to recall masks containing graphene. Now, graphene is very, very interesting. Until the start of this month, Google was pretty confident that graphene was this miracle material. But no, apparently it causes lung toxicity in animals. Probably safe on kids, though. No, forget that last statement. I can't even joke on this. Canada is one of those places that I've seen videos of cops literally wrestling a guy to the ground to put a mask on. I could personally tell you not to wear any masks containing graphene, or at least look and see if yours contains that. But I do believe that the terms of service on this website require me to tell you that all masks are good and wonderful, and so effective that you must wear too. Except neck gaiters, sometimes. You see why I don't play this game? Of just saying what the powers that be want, and why Google is not an arbiter of science? It's not that the group is always wrong, just as I'm not always right. But when people don't question things, when they get hooked up into a narrative, people get very, very hurt. Long term, permanently. In the third and final draft of the video is very harsh. It's very powerful, and there's a lot of visceral disgust upon learning this revelation. This revelation basically told me that I have to do this because I know that ain't no one else gonna. No matter what the damned consequences are, I have to speak up. And I guess my nervousness and hesitation is trying to get ahead of that, giving a warning up front. Because learning this news, I can't even articulate how much it disgusts me. And I feel a need that I have to give the same shaming that every single wear a fucking mask to save a fucking life person shot at me. Because if I didn't, I don't know if I could sleep at night. Sure, save grandma by telling little Jimmy that he's going to kill her if he doesn't give himself asthma for the rest of his life, or cut it short via lung cancer. You really deserve the moral high ground. Future's gonna have a funny view of all of us. I love the memes during all of this. If we find out after all of this that masks did nothing, then I'll know that at least I cared enough to do something simple to save lives. Dipshit, being positive or doing nothing are not the only two options. Doing something harmful has also been a possibility this whole time, which is why we don't do arbitrary random things. Hell, even if masks have no negative side effects and legitimately do nothing whatsoever, people acting like they were effective when they weren't would have led to more spread of disease. It is common sense. During World War II, people didn't care about their freedoms and were willing to shut the lights out at night. Yeah, well, despite the risk that they could have been bombed at any minute, they still sent their kids to school and celebrated Christmas. Don't talk to me about morals of the past. Wonder what they think of what you're doing with the world that those veterans fought for. With all due respect, I do not have the ability to shut up, and it's not something I'm going to apologize for, ever. You're gonna hear less about my political, real-world side when the world calms down, and it will calm down, it always does. But I find it my purpose to challenge people, in all realms, not just in animation. My purpose is to make people think. One thing I know in my life is there's no straightforward answers in anything, and the delusion that there is tends to break society apart. It is my purpose in life to destroy that delusion in any means that I can, and this is a purpose that I am very much proud of.